All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome back. If it's your first time, welcome. Today we're going to be going with a little, I'll say, southwestern bouquet, I guess. In the springtime, usually for like the March, April painting classes, a lot of people want to do flowers. And being that I've done these classes with the library for so long, we have done a lot of flowers. We've done all, the common kind of spring flowers. I think we've done tulips, we've done sunflowers, we've done daisies, we've done peonies, all things like that, roses, I think. So I was trying to think of a little bit of a different kind of floral arrangement. So we came up with this. And so this one is going to be really fun because there's a lot of areas to make the painting your own. If you want to do the background a different color, all these flowers can be different colors. Pretty much anything in here. I'm going to say probably try to keep the cactus green, but if you want to make them a dark blue, a purple, a red, honestly, it's going to come out great. Usually my suggestion for when we do paintings is that less is more. I always say that it's really hard to know when to stop, but I think with a painting like this, more is more. So we want really bright colors, we want lots of things filling in all the little spaces between our bigger plants, I'll say. So really have fun with this one, even if we get to the end of the video and you're still adding little details or you want to put a little something here, a little something there that I didn't do, I would say go for it. This one can handle it. It's kind of hard to see in the camera, but what I'm dealing with here today is very bright colors. This is a very bright orange in the background, bright pinks, bright oranges on the flowers, bright purples, blues, all of that stuff. So today we're going to be, I'll say, wary of adding our blacks and our whites to our colors. I think the only place that I have black in here is going to be right here. So we're going to try to just stay with our plain old, not out of the tube colors, but we don't want to mix and dilute a lot of the colors that we're having here. We want it to be nice and vibrant. So as always, we have some stuff that we're going to need. We have our blow dryer. We'll need that maybe once or twice. I have my paints over here. Again, just our neutrals, our black and our white. Yellow. I have 2 blues just because that's what it came with, and a red. We're going to mix all the colors from those, so if you don't have any other colors, that's fine. But if you do have other colors, if you have a purple that's already mixed, if you have like this kind of teal green color that's already mixed or already in a tube for you, go ahead and use those. We don't want to make more work for ourselves. We have a palette to mix our paint. We have clean water. We have a variety of brushes. For this painting today, we're going to need at least one very big brush. I'll say maybe my 1.5 to my big kind of painter brush, house paint brush back here to do the background. We're going to need at least one medium-sized brush, so something in the 1 inch or 1/2 inch range. And then we're going to need a little brush for details, something little like this. And then if you have a angled brush for some of these in-between steps, something that looks like this, then maybe we'll use one of those. We don't need this, but if you have it, pull it out. We have our rag to dry off our brushes. It looks like I need a new rag. Mine is pretty dirty. And of course we have our brand new canvas. So let me go ahead and put all of this to the side here. And we'll go ahead and get started. So first things first, we always start with the background. I chose the orange for this painting because I felt like it really pushed that kind of southwesty look, and it really contrasts well with the greens and the blues. So I would say if you're looking for that kind of pop, I would go with a warm color. So your warm colors are going to be your reds, your yellows, your oranges. So if you wanted to do your background red, you could do that. If you wanted to do it a nice deep yellow, you could do that. That would look nice. because most of the stuff in the foreground is going to be cool colors. So we have our blues, our teals, our greens, light green, dark green, our purples, even the pinks kind of, it's a warm color, but it kind of, changes sides. So you want something that's going to contrast against these cool colors in the foreground. So I'm going to go with orange. So I'm going to do, I don't know, we'll see. Depending on how dark you want your orange, I would say it's probably smart to start with 90% yellow, 10% red. You can always add more red, but it's hard to take it away once you have mixed it. And so here's a little tip. If you don't mind washing brushes, I would say if you have a big amount of paint, so we're mixing our background paint right now, so I have quite a bit. If you have quite a bit of paint, try to mix it with a different brush. Doesn't matter what brush, but that will reduce the likelihood that you're going to mix with the brush that you're going to paint, and then when you go to paint the background, you're going to get a big streak of like red that got caught in the brush and kind of the bristles in between, which will give you kind of an uneven background. So if you have a brush to spare, then I would say go ahead and just mix with any other brush that you have. If you don't, that's okay. You can always mix, just make sure you're mixing super thoroughly. Or you could even mix the paint and then wash your brush and then go back and paint the background. Okay, so this is a pretty, I'll say, pretty standard color wheel, like orange. If you want yours a little lighter, go a little heavier on the yellow. If you want it a little darker, like a burnt orange more, like a red orange, go a little heavier on the red. It's completely up to you. And so this background, I am going to be adding some white to the background because we don't want it to be overwhelming to the foreground, if that makes sense. I'm just adding a little more of both because I don't know if I have enough paint. So I'll just add a little bit more of each. The ratio was good. And so there's two different ways that you can go about doing this background. It looks pretty even in the recording here, but in real life, the background of my painting that's already completed is not completely smooth orange. There's a little bit of texture in it where I have a little bit of lighter spots and some darker spots because I put in some white, and I'll show you that as we're doing it, but just so you know that there is two ways you can go about doing this. You can make the background one solid color. It can be just the plain orange that you mixed up wall to wall. I like the way that looks because it's nice and smooth. It gives you kind of a neutral background to have all of your fun things in the foreground. The downside to that is, and I figured this out the hard way, is I don't know if you can see it down here a little bit. If you accidentally drop a little blob of the wrong color paint where you don't want it, if you don't have any background color left, it's going to be really hard to cover up that spot. Whereas if you give yourself a little variety in the background, a little texture, so like lighter areas, darker areas, then it's going to be easier to cover up if you made a flower too big, or if you put one here and you don't want it there, it doesn't look good. If you accidentally drop your brush on your canvas, I've done that, in the wrong spot, and if it's in a weird spot and you can't really cover it up. The textured background, I'll say, gives you a little bit more forgiveness. If you don't want to do that though, if you want it to be completely smooth and you like the way it looks nice and flat, you can definitely do that. Just make sure that you are left with some paint when you're done painting the background. So make sure you have a little bit of it left. So if you do need to touch up the background later on when you're almost done, you can do that and you have it, because I didn't do that this time. But that's why I'm here, to make the mistakes that you all don't need to make. That's my job. So, and I'll show you what I mean by both of them, because you can kind of choose whether you want a smooth background or a textured background in the same canvas. You don't need to do just one or the other, and I'll show you what I mean there. So I'm going to take some of my white. And so we're covering the whole thing, edges, top, bottom, sides, all of that. So really just scoop it up and start in there. There's no right or wrong way to go about doing this. And so I'll show you what I mean by a textured background. So if you wanted a plain background that's nice and smooth, you would just paint the whole thing in evenly. If you're going for a little bit more of a textured background, I'm going to take my same brush, I'm going to load it up with white. You can see I didn't rinse my brush or anything, it's all the same brush. And I'm going to start to mix the white in here. So give it another big dip. And so you'll see here, I'm starting to get some texture in my background. I'm not painting it smooth. I'm kind of doing these little circular motions. I find that when it's your first layer, going in these little circular motions covers the background easier. If you've ever painted your background a really dark color right off the bat, like that's your first background color, you'll notice it gets little almost like pinhole looking gaps where you can paint right over it, but then the little kind of pinholes, it's little bubbles popping because the canvas is a little bit textured, even though it's should be gessoed if you buy it from like an art supply or craft store. They do still have a little bit of texture in them, so it kind of traps little air bubbles, and then if you don't go over it twice, you'll get these little pinpricks of white poking through. And that happens with any color. It's just more noticeable with the dark colors. But the same thing will happen here, but I find if you do kind of either figure eight motions or the circle motions, it kind of buries the paint in those little nooks and crannies, and it helps you not get the little bubbles. But you can see what I mean here by a textured background. You're almost getting kind of like a tie-dyed look if you want to go with this kind of uneven looking background. And so you're just going to keep adding your white and your orange. And of course, there's no right or wrong way to do this. And there's kind of a sliding scale here in terms of what you want your background to look like. It doesn't have to be either completely smooth or completely textured and jumbled. You can do one like this canvas that I have that's mostly smooth, but there still is, I don't know if you can see, a little bit here, a little bit up here. I mean, there's a little bit of texture in it. It's not completely just one color. Or you can go big like this one and, you know, do lots and lots of texture. It's whatever you want. Like I said, as long as you're reserving a little of that color, whatever orange or yellow or red or whatever color you've mixed for the background, as long as you have some of that on reserve in case anything happens to our background, you never know, then go with whatever look you like the best. I might go with a little bit more of a texture with this canvas, just to show you what the two look like. Again, this is just all on the same brush. Just kind of going back and forth here, filling in. Now I don't paint my edges because I hold onto my canvas like this and I would have a big orange hand if I did, but if you're going to hang your painting, make sure you get your edges, your left, your right, your top. Okay. All right, so I think I like that for me. You can see it's a little more textured than this other side. Okay, and we'll go with that. All right, so brush in the water. This is the part where we are going to pause. We're going to blow dry our background right now. We don't want to pick up any of that orange when we're doing all our nice stuff on top. Or if you don't have a blow dryer or don't want to use the blow dryer, you can just honestly let it sit and dry for maybe 5 minutes. It doesn't take that long to dry. If you want to give it a couple, I know I've seen some people hold it and just kind of like swing it side to side or up and down a couple times, that's fine too. You'll notice it'll go from shiny and wet looking to matte when it's dry. It doesn't take that long, so whatever method you're going to use, go ahead and pause the video right now or give it a quick dry, and then we will come back when our background is totally dry. Okay, so we're back, we're dry. If you need to rinse your brushes, you can do that. We're going to be going with, I'll say a medium to big size brush. So if you have anything that's 1/2 inch to 2 inch, then that's good to go. Doesn't matter if it's round or straight. Let's see. I'll probably go with something like this. This is maybe 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, something like that. It also depends on the size of your canvas. This is a 16 by 20. If you've ever been to a paint and sip type place, they usually use these 16 by 20s. If you have a smaller canvas, then you're gonna size down your brushes to kind of match. So the first thing up we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be working on our tall guy cactuses back here. And so we're not gonna worry about the flowers or the needles or any of that stuff. Right now we're just gonna be focusing on the bodies of the cactus. And I'm going to say this a few times throughout the painting. If you want to do a different arrangement, different type of cactus, different shape, different color, that's totally okay. I want you to do what you like the best and what you feel like fits the best and what you can do the best. These are just my examples. They're by no means the right way to do this painting. So take everything that I say with a little bit of your own personal spin. So we're going to be moving from, I'll say, background to foreground loosely as we do all of our plants here. So we're going to be doing, like I said, these tall guys first. We're going to come in with these kind of paddle looking cacti. Keep wanting to say cactuses. I think it's cacti. These paddles back here. Then we're going to come in with some of the succulent or aloe variations down here, and then we're going to be adding these little details and flowers and spikes and pins and needles and all that stuff on top. So the details come last. So right now we're thinking big picture here. So we're going to go ahead and mix up our greens. We're going to need a light green and a dark green. I mentioned that I have 2 blues here. If you got kind of like a standard pack of paints, these are just like craft paints, then you might have 2 also. There's an ultramarine and there's a phthalo blue or phthalo blue. You can use either one of these to mix this color green. What I would say is that the ultramarine works a little bit better with what we're doing here because it's brighter, it's more vibrant. If you look at them next to each other, this one's a little more dull. This one's really good for like water if you're doing like a natural, like a stream or like a pond or even like I guess a sky or something like that. Here I have the two samples on the top. This one's really deep. It's a full color. This one's really bright and vibrant. You want it for all your, your exciting things. So if you have it, go with ultramarine. If not, you can do this. We might have to supplement with a little bit of white or something. Also, like I said earlier, if you have a green in a tube already mixed, then use the green. We don't need to be mixing colors if you don't need to or you don't want to. It's definitely good practice if you're looking to get better at mixing colors, but if I had a tube of green, I would use the green. So for this green, even though we're using our lighter blue, the blue is still very dark and the yellow is still very light. So even more so than our red and our yellow mixture here, you're going to want to add the tiniest bit of blue. You can always add more, but go really sparingly with the blue into your green. I don't know if you can see, or the blue into your yellow, I'm sorry. I don't know if you can see mine here. I put just a tiny drop and it still might be too dark. But we'll see. So you're going to want to go 98% yellow, 2% blue. And we'll see. We'll see what we get. So the good part of this is that we need a dark green and a light green. So when you start, if you accidentally put too much blue in your yellow and it turns like a really dark green, that's fine. We need that too. So don't worry about going too dark on this first pass. All right, I'm going to put just a drop more. Again, sparingly. We want to go, it's going to be kind of like a limey green. So we're making sure there's not any blue left in there. You don't want to get a big streak of blue in your nice light green when you're applying it. Okay. So I have my light green there. It actually looks pretty yellow in the container, but it's green if you look at it up against here. So we've got our light green. I would say make sure to make a pretty good sized portion of this color because I'm going to be using it for the green on the tall cacti and the green on these paddle cacti too. It's going to be the same color. It looks a little bit different in the picture because in this one we're putting a little bit of blue and a little bit of white into the mix here, so it looks a little bit different. We're going to be doing that a lot in this painting, where we're going to take one certain color and it's going to help us make another color. Because A, we don't want to waste paint, and B, we don't want to be doing work where we don't have to do work, right? We don't want to be left over with a whole palette full of paints. I want to use all of the paint that I pour out of my containers because paints are expensive, especially if you paint a lot. So we want to be conscious of the paint that we're using. So we have our light green here. So let's go ahead and mix up our dark green. And so you don't need quite as much of this dark green. Like I said, we can always use it to kind of inform our other colors. So we can use the dark green, we can turn it into this. We can do little leaves or something later if you want to use your little dark green. But I'm going to use just the same brush because it's the same colors that we're mixing. We're just doing different ratios. So this darker green, you're going to go kind of opposite end of the spectrum there. You're going to do maybe, I think I did like maybe 50-50 blue to yellow to make this darker green, and I might even need a little more blue. But it's good to start sparingly with the blue because you don't want it to be just blue. You're gonna have to pour so much green into it, or yellow into it, I'm sorry. All right, so I'll show you what I started with. That's the color that I kind of started with. I definitely want it darker than that. We're going for, let's see, this dark green is kind of like a, I don't know, it's what you might think of when you think of like a grassy green. Or it's almost even like a forest green, I'll say. It's pretty dark. Okay, we're mixing, we're mixing. Looks pretty good to me. So I have my dark green, my light green. Go ahead and put these back. Okay, now we have two choices here. We can either rinse off our brush and start with our light green, or we can keep this on our brush. We already just mixed up our dark green with this color, or with this brush, and we can stick with this brush and start with our dark green. You can do either one that you want. I think I started with light over here. Maybe I'll start with dark over here. I'm going to try to do my arrangement different on this canvas than I did with this canvas, just so you can see kind of the variety that you can make with this. Like I said, nothing's in a right or a wrong position here. It's just kind of whatever you like better. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a very just general kind of oblong shape here. It doesn't have to be a certain width or a certain length or certain dimensions right now. We're just going to fill it in with this green. This is my dark green. I'm going to not rinse my brush right now. And these cacti can also come in those, if you've ever seen those little squat kind of round cactus, they look almost like a little pumpkin. So if you want to do some little round ones here, I have kind of like a little shorter one over here, you can do that. If you want to throw like a little arm on one of these guys, you know, like that type of cactus, you can do that with these. You've got options here. So let's see. Maybe I'll do one big one, and we can kind of outline for ourselves here, right? So maybe I'll make a two. And maybe I'll do a short one over here. Okay. So we're not going to worry too much about where these let off down here at the bottom, because it's going to be covered with a ton of other stuff. So what we're going to do right now is we're just going to paint these in with whatever color that you just started with, your dark green, your light green, whatever you chose. Now the green is pretty dark, and if your background is either like my color or lighter, it should cover pretty well. I think I can get away with one layer here, because we're going to be adding that light green over top also. But if you feel like your colors are not super vibrant, or they're not sticking very well, then you can definitely do two coats. So you're going to do, if you feel like you need to do that, go ahead and do one layer, and then pause and blow dry, and then do another layer right on top. Now, if you feel like you're putting your brush down on the canvas, let me give you an example. If you feel like you're brushing your paint on and you're putting your paintbrush down on the canvas and you're doing this, seeing it just dragged all my paint right away, try to come at your canvas not straight on, but angle your brush instead of like this so that it's like this. So you're almost just dragging the flat side of your brush against the canvas. And that'll make it so you pull less paint off. It's just making the area that your brush touches the canvas more broad. So you're not getting that real sharp contact between your brush and the canvas. And if your little cacti overlap here, like mine do, that's fine. If your cacti overlap a lot and you want a way to kind of make sure they get differentiated from each other, you can do a little white highlight. I didn't do that over here, but I'll show you if you want to do that now. Not all of it is going to show up because we're going to be putting the lighter green on also, but if you have one that's super overlapped like this one, what you can do is keep your green on your brush or whatever color you used, put a little bit of white, and then choose one side of the cactus, so one of the sides that's overlapping here, and starting at the top, just kind of trace your edge. Right? So that kind of just pulled that one cactus to the front here. If you want to do the same thing on this side, go ahead and just trace the edge here with your white. Again, you don't need to do this, but if you feel like, if your cacti are overlapping a lot and you feel like it just kind of looks like a jumbled mess right now, that's okay. Throw a little highlight on them. Okay, beautiful. All right, so if you want to use the same brush, go ahead and rinse that one. If you have a different one, grab your different brush. Rinse, dry your brush. I don't know if I've talked about this in a while, but if you're here for the first time, dabbing your brush in the bottom of the cup so that the brush bristles kind of splay out at the bottom. It's not going to hurt your brush unless you're really like jamming it in there, but give it, a few taps so that when you hit the bottom, it kind of opens up those bristles. That'll get the paint out of in between all the bristles. And then make sure when you dry your brush, you're drying it with the brush head down. If you dry it this way, sometimes what happens is a bunch of water gets stuck in this metal part, and so then when you go to paint and you turn your brush this way, all the water runs out and you're going to have a big watery mess. So always dry your brushes, brush head down. Okay. So what we're going to do now is going to depend on how much paint and how wet your canvas is right now. If you feel like your 3 or however many cacti that you just did are very wet, then you're going to want to go ahead and hit it with the blow dryer before we do these kind of paddle guys. If you feel like it's pretty dry, then we can go ahead and do the lighter green color on these cacti. Again, it just depends on your canvas, so if you do need to hit it with the blow dryer really quick, go ahead and do that. It doesn't need to be like 100% bone dry right now. It just needs to be dry enough so that when you paint the light green on, it's not going to just completely disappear into your dark green. So I would say if it's looking nice and shiny, if you have kind of areas that have bigger clumps of paint, pause the video right now, hit it with the blow dryer for 20 seconds, and then come on back. Okay. And now the reason why I said hit it with a blow dryer for only like 20 or 15 or 20 seconds is because when we go in with our light green, you don't want it to sit directly on top of your dark green. You want it to kind of blend a little bit. But since our light green is so light and our dark green is so dark, if you put them on top of each other when the dark green is super wet, it's gonna just kind of, the light green's gonna kind of just disappear. So I'll show you on mine. I don't know if you can see, but mine, like right here, is still a little bit wet. You can see in the middle there, it's still a little wet. There's little spots that are not 100% dry, but that's okay. We just don't want it like fresh. All right, so I'm gonna take my same brush. This is my maybe 1/2 or 3/4 inch brush that I use to paint these guys on. And we're gonna move to our light green. And again, we're using our light green for the kind of stripes on these bigger guys and for these paddle looking cacti at the bottom. So we'll get a nice brush load of our light green, and we're gonna go ahead and start to make stripes on these guys. I would say the thing that I learned the most doing this painting, if you look over at these guys, is that the stripes on your cacti do not need to be straight. The more I tried to get them like perfectly parallel and straight, the worse it looked, because it looked so unnatural. It looked like a striped something rather than a cacti that, you know, their little ridges are not perfectly straight. They have a little bit of a wobble to them. So don't feel like you need to work to get all those stripes perfectly straight. Cacti are not pinstriped, you know, they just kind of grow the way that they grow. So don't take all of your time trying to make them perfectly even, because it's not going to look great. That's kind of what I did at first, and then I was like, oh, that doesn't really look like a cactus. So don't worry about that. Especially when it comes to the edges here. It doesn't need to be a perfectly round cacti like we did over here. Your edge can kind of wobble too. So we'll dip in. You can start either at the top or at the base, whatever you want. And I'm always going to start with the one that's in the background the furthest. So if you've ever taken my class before, you always know that I say start in the background and work your way to the foreground. Because what I'm going to do is when I get down to here, it's going to overlap this second cactus a little bit. And I'll show you here. I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to come down. And I'm going to get as close as I can, but it is going to overlap that second one a little bit. And so that's okay, because when we move to our second one and we do the edge on here, it's going to paint right over that part where they overlapped, and it's going to make it look like this one is in front of this one. So you always want to do your things that are in your background first, and then move to your middle and your foreground. So I'm going to go this guy, this guy, this guy. All right. So again, starting at the top, no pressure on our kind of wobbly shape. If you want to kind of pick up and put down your brush a little bit, if that makes sense. So when you're putting your colors on, if you press with uneven pressure, when you're going down, take your brush and kind of do this. So squish it against the canvas, then pick it up a little bit. Squish it against, pick it up a little bit. That's going to give you kind of variations in the width of the brush. And that'll give you this kind of waviness going on here. And so we are going to follow kind of the contours of the cactus here. So our stripe in the middle is going to be mostly straight. Our stripes on the sides, like if you saw this one on the left, I went with the curve of the side of the cactus. So now when I come on my right side, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to curve it a little bit to the right, just to mirror that right edge, that curve. All right, maybe I'll get a thin one on this side. Neat. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing with the other two. We're going to dip into our light green. And so this one came out pretty light green. Maybe I'll do, I'll let some of the darker, or more of the dark green shine through on this bigger one. So I'm going to come, let's see, I'm going to come on this left side here, and I'll make these stripes a little bit thinner, like I said. And I'm kind of mirroring the contour of the cactus. So this guy in the middle is going to come down pretty straight. I'll do maybe one more on the edge here. Okay. All right, so you can see how it almost looks like we have two different cacti there, right? Because this one's more dark green. I made my light green lines thinner. This one's mostly light green. You can just see little slivers of that dark green sticking through. So even without changing our colors, we made two cacti that look pretty different. And that's kind of going to be the theme of this whole thing, right? We're using many of the same colors. We're just going to do different shapes, different sizes, things like that to give us a lot of variation. All right, so let's go ahead and finish this guy over here. Our last big cacti, I'll say. And now this light green is going to be the same light green that we're going to use for these paddle cacti that I have right underneath these guys. If you are running out of this light green, just go ahead and mix some more. It doesn't need to be the same exact color as you use up here. In fact, even if you have to mix some more, that's totally fine. It'll just give you even more variety, right? But if you have the same light green, if you have enough, if you mixed kind of like a big pot of it, then go ahead and use that light green. That's what I'm going to use. Okay. All right, we have our three cacti at the top here. And so I'm going to keep the same brush. We're going to move to these paddle guys. So all of these big elements that we're doing now, so these cacti that we just did, the paddles, and I'll say these kind of succulent aloe looking guys at the bottom, those are going to be our main focal point. So when you're deciding where you want to put your paddles, you want to put them in places that is going to make a nice shape. So when I'm looking at this, I wouldn't put one big paddle right here because then it's going to kind of shift the balance of everything that's happening over here. I think it would be good to put a bigger one on this side because all these guys are kind of tipping that way. So maybe I'll put one big one over here and then one smaller one down here. So the big elements kind of serve to balance the whole painting, where the smaller elements kind of just serve the purpose of filling in spaces. So let's see. I'll show you right here. So on this canvas, I had my big cacti, I had my paddle here, and then I did my little aloe here. But right here where this flower is, there was a gap. These two paddles didn't touch. This didn't come up high enough. There was just kind of like an orange spot right here that showed through. So that's not to say that your arrangement that you make right now has to be perfect. If something doesn't line up right, or if the areas where your different plants meet up don't look right, that's okay for now. What you don't want is like huge gaps in between any of your pieces. And like I said, you don't want something that's like crazy unbalanced because these little detail guys aren't going to be able to rebalance those bigger pieces. So the bigger pieces, what you want to go for is kind of more of a visual balance. The little guys are to add volume, I'll say. So let's see, we're deciding where we want to put these big paddle guys. I'm using that same light green that I had before, same brush of what I was just doing. I'm not going to rinse it or anything. And I'm deciding where I'm going to put my paddles right now. So if you look at how I ended this, it actually kind of worked out nice. I didn't do that on purpose, but I have it kind of, there's a curve here and a curve here. And now you can certainly paint over the bottoms of these. If you look, I didn't end them in any certain way. They just kind of ended where they ended, right? So if you want to put one big one right here in the middle, you can paint over this part, and that's totally fine. But it looks like mine ended in kind of a neat way, so let me go ahead and use that. So I'm going to have one paddle here. Just giving that a light fill with the extra paint that was on my brush. And then maybe I'll do one smaller one over here. Now these paddles are a little bit pointed at the top. It's not a perfect circle. If you do them in a circle, that's fine. And if you look right here in the middle, I have kind of an area where it's not going to line up super nice, but that's okay. Maybe I'll do another one. Let's see. Yeah, maybe I'll do another one right behind this one. Just a little one. Okay. So I have my kind of the base for my little paddles in here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little drop of my blue. I'm going to put it in its own little container right here. Because what we're going to do is we're going to add to these little paddles some white and a little bit of blue to pull them away from the cacti in the background here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my green on my brush. This is just the green that I kind of filled these guys in with. If you look right now, I just used up the green that was already on my brush to fill these in lightly. But you can definitely still see the orange through the background, so don't worry about that. We're going to address that right now. So I'm going to take my green brush, I'm going to dip it in some white, and the white is going to work into this green, and it's going to make that light green a lot hardier. Right, so if you look at the difference between this one and these two, this one is much brighter, much easier to see. If you do need to add a little bit more of the light green, you can definitely add that just right here on the same brush. If you feel like your paddles are turning too white, go ahead and get some more of your green, kind of bulk it up. Okay, so now my paddles have some heft to them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretty quickly take another brush. It can be a flat one, it can be an angled one. It doesn't really matter. So something small, I'll say similar to or a little bit smaller than the one that we just used. This is just the only one that I happen to have that's kind of this size, so I'm going to go ahead and use this one. So I have my green one. I'll just throw that to the side right now. And what I'm going to do is, like I said, I put a little bit of blue in one little palette, and I'm going a little fast because it's kind of time sensitive here. I'm going to take a little bit of blue and a lot of white. And in the corner of my one little palette here, I'm going to mix up some very light blue. Just enough to coat your brush. We don't need a whole pile of it. So just a little light blue there. And I'm going to use this light blue to highlight these colors or these paddles in the same way that I used the white to highlight these guys. So this color is going to stand to kind of pull each paddle away from each other. So I'm going to choose one edge, preferably the edge that is being overlapped by another one of the paddles. And I'm going to give it a highlight just down one side. And then I'm going to do the same with this guy. We'll give him a little highlight on the top here. And then this guy doesn't really need it, but we'll do it just because the other guys have it, right? A little bit of a blue highlight there. And if you see, I started to pick my paint up a little bit there, so if I need to switch back to my green brush and kind of fill that in, I can do that. All right. If you still feel like there's not enough difference between each of your paddles, you can definitely kind of rope in a little bit of your darker green, the green that we used up for these guys. And so I'll show you an example on this one. Since I did my highlight on one side, I can do either my low light, I guess you'd call it, on the other side. And so this is going to work in nice and smoothly because our paint is still wet, right? So that even pulled that one forward a little bit more. And that's the reason we're doing this kind of quickly, is we want the paint on the paddles right now to still be wet, so that if we need to work in any of these other colors, it's going to take more easily. If those colors on the actual paddles were dry right now, we wouldn't be able to blend these in as nicely. Not at all. All right, looks like a couple of eggs down there, right? They'll get better when we add our little spikes to them, right? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse these two brushes. I'm going to probably use those in the future. But like I said, we're not worrying about our spikes, our flowers, or little pins on these guys yet. That's going to come last because we're going to make the most of our time here. And we're going to let these kind of naturally air dry while we're doing the other components here. So I'm going to wash and dry these guys. So I'm going to use them both again. Again, this is my maybe 1/2 to 3/4 inch brush. And this little angled guy that I found before. Doesn't need to be an angled brush at this point. It's just what you have. Okay. So here comes the fun part, if this all wasn't fun already. We are going to make some of our other plants down here. So this I kind of looked at just what a regular succulent looked like. This is kind of like an aloe type plant. So this is the part where you can choose whatever colors you want. You can make a pink one, a purple one. You can do a really light orange one, a yellow one, blue, teal, whatever color you want to think of. You can use any colors down here. I used the blue just because I hadn't used the blue before, and I knew that I wanted to use pink for the flowers, so I resisted doing a pink succulent down here. So I'll go ahead and show you how to do this type of succulent. So you can do multiple of these ones if you want to do a couple in different colors. You can skip this one altogether and just do these kind of aloes if you don't have a ton of room at the bottom. Whatever works for what you want to do on your canvas. But I'm going to show you how to do them all. And so this worked out pretty well because I'm going to do, again, a blue succulent. Maybe I'll do I'll do one of each because I'm going to show you how to do each one. But if I was doing this just on my own, I might have just done 2 of these little succulents here at the bottom. I think that might have looked nice. But just for the sake of the lesson, I'll show you how to do both. But this is going to work out good because I have this kind of blob of dark blue here that I used to make the little light blue on the paddles. So I'm going to use that dark blue, and I'm going to make this color down here with the dark blue that I already have in my palette. I might need a little bit more, but that's okay. And I already have some white in my palette. I'm going to go ahead and use that too. Because if you look here, the combinations of colors in this plant right here are just dark blue and white. And so when you get to the little bottoms in here, it's just more of the dark blue. And then the kind of highlighted lighter parts on the petals are just where I've thrown some white in there. So not too much complicated color mixing right here. I'll show you kind of these in-between parts, and the tips I used a different color for, but we'll get to that after. So what I want to do right now with this dark blue that I have, you can use it straight out of the container, out of your bottle. The thing that I recommend you do though with this dark blue, as well as with, I'll say almost any color straight out of the bottle, is that you want to put a tiny drop of white into it. And what that's going to do is it's not really going to change the color. It's not going to make it a light blue. It's going to keep this dark blue color, but what it's going to do is make it more opaque. So if I brushed some of this dark blue right now out of the bottle onto my canvas, it's going to come out pretty transparent. So by adding just, a touch, maybe even less than this, just dipped my brush into the white. By mixing it into here, it's not really going to lighten the color that much. It's just going to make it a fuller, less transparent color. And that's going to help us so that we don't need to do 3 layers of everything, right? So just throw a little tiny bit of white in there. It's not going to change the color, so you're not waiting for, your light blue to come out. It's just going to kind of disappear into there, but you'll see it in the texture of the paint, I'll say. So look at that. It's still the same super dark blue color. You wouldn't even know that we put any white into it. All right. So what we're going to do now is when we're putting this big succulent guy on, I'm going to do him first because he's bigger than this that we have over here. And what we want to do first is outline the shape of him. So all it's made up of is little football shapes, eyeball shapes, pointed ovals, whatever you identify with there. It's just kind of a bunch of little football shapes all stacked on top of each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to outline our outermost leaves, I'll call them, our outermost leaves first. Then we're just going to put a couple in the middle and fill them in, and then we'll have our shape, and then we're going to start to fill it in. So I'll show you what I mean here. So I might switch sides. I'm going to put him over here maybe. So I'm going to start, like I said, with my outermost leaves. So that's these guys, and then I'll worry about the middle ones later. I'm going to take my brush that I just mixed that white into, and I'm going to just start with my football shapes. Right, so I'm just going to build. If they overlap, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine too. If it runs off the bottom of your canvas, it's all good. Okay, and like I said, I'm going to come into the middle. And I'm going to fill in the middle with more of these football shapes. I'll come right down to the bottom here with one. All right, and there's your base for your succulent. And so this guy, we're going to take a pause with this guy here. Because what have we been talking about the whole time? We want to go background to foreground. So if I want this guy to be in my foreground, if I don't want anything to cover this guy, this is one of my favorites. I really like the way it looks. So I don't want really anything that's going to sit over top of this guy. If you look down here, I have like a little something in the corner, but nothing major. But if I want this one to fall behind this one, then I need to do this other one first, because then I'm going to paint this guy over top, if that makes sense. So whichever one you want to see the most or see the majority of, you want to do that one last, because we're not going to have to cover it up with any other plants. So I think I'm going to do this guy underneath. So this guy's going to sit and hang out right here. Our blue paint is going to sit and hang out right where it is. I'm going to keep using the same brush, so I'm going to go ahead and rinse that. But it's important that we have our outline so we know where to put what is going over here. It's kind of in a planning phase right now. All right. So I'll rinse this guy off. Okay. So this little, I keep calling him aloe. I guess it's an aloe plant. Over here. So let's see. We can use a color that we've already mixed. As I've said a few times, you can mix up whatever kind of colors you want to mix up and use whatever you want to use, but I don't like to waste paint, so I'm going to go ahead and use my dark green that I used for my cacti to make a color to color this guy in with. And so what I think I'm going to do is just take some of the dark blue and I'm going to add it to this green, and it's going to make this kind of tealy green blue, right? If you add blue to green, you make green blue. So let me go ahead and take my ultramarine. I'll add a couple drops in there and I'll see what we get. Chances are it's not going to come out exactly the same as this did over here. If it does, that would be incredible, but I'm not trying to go for the same exact color. I had a lot of fun with this one mixing up the different colors that I was going to use because I didn't have a vision of what they were going to look like when they came out. I kind of just started mixing and you know, having fun with that, and then it just kind of turned into what it was going to turn into. And I'm okay with that. The way that you're going to come out with nice vibrant colors, again, is to try to limit the amount of white or black. Like I said, I didn't use any black mixing this just yet. But try to not use those colors when you're mixing in your, whatever you're mixing in on your plate or in your little containers like I have. It's better if you want to add white or if you want to add a darker value to add them on the canvas like we did here with our highlights and our lowlights. So try not to mix your whites or your blacks in your palette. Mix them on the canvas. It'll keep your colors from getting muddy. You definitely need those highlights and lowlights sometimes, but they come through better if you add them on the canvas and not to your color. if that makes sense. All right, so what have we got here? Kind of like a, ooh, that looks horrible on the camera. That's not a great looking color on the camera, but I'll tell you what it looks like in real life. It kind of looks like a, if you look up like a peacock green or peacock blue, it's that real in between blue green color that's kind of popular right now. So I like that. We're gonna go with this. And so it looks pretty dark right now. It almost looks just like the screen, but I promise it's not. It looks different in real life. And with this guy, we're going to be adding some white into it on the canvas. So it's going to lighten up quite a bit from this. Okay. So this is going to be kind of like the planning stage like we did with this plant over here. We're just going to start to plan where we're going to put our leaves. Are they called leaves on aloe plants? These guys are spiky pieces. So we're going to start to plan out where we're going to put those guys. When it comes to doing a plant like this, it's a lot more flowing than the cacti or than the succulent. They're pretty rigid, I'll say. But this guy, you know, you're going to give those little leaves some movement. And so you'll notice that none of these are perfectly straight. At least all of them have a little curve at the tip, or at the bottom here they're curved a little bit, so try not to make them just straight in. It's going to look like a lettuce or like a celery stalk if you do that. So give them a little bit of a wave here and there. And so right now we're going to adjust our color. We're not adding our white yet. Like I said, this is kind of like planning stage. So I'm going to throw mine over here. And again, it's okay if it overlaps this guy, because then we're going to paint this guy in second. So this one is actually going to come over top of this one. Right now it's going to not look like that, but this one will come through on top. So let's see, where am I going to start? In the middle here. I usually start at the top, I don't know why. So again, give them a little something, a little movement. They're going to be thinner at the top than they are at the bottom. So I'm just giving them a little wave here and there. They can start to kind of fall out here towards the outside. Okay, that looks good enough for me. And so word to the wise, so I'm not going to put any more branches over here. Let's see, I could throw one right here, but if you look at what space this is taking up, if I put a leaf right here, I'm not going to see it, because this is going to end up on top of this. So if you see where our little football shape landed from before, this part of our plant and this part of our plant is going to get covered. So I'm not going to put any leaves over here because we're not going to see them. Don't waste time on something that you're not going to end up seeing. Okay, so it looks a little bit unbalanced now, but it's going to balance out, I promise. So we look at what we have here. I'm going to use my same exact brush that I just applied that kind of blue color with. I'm not going to rinse it, and I'm going to keep that blue on there, and I'm going to add a little bit of white on the bottom. And so we're going to, again, run down each of these leaves. We're going to run down each of these leaves that we just made, except we're going to add a little bit of a white highlight. We kind of did that on these, we did that on these, we're going to do it on these guys too. And so you don't want to cover the entire leaf with the white highlight. As much as you can, you want to try to get it on one side of the leaf. I know they're really, mine are very thin, so it might be a little tricky just to get it on one side. Start on one of your bigger leaves, give it a practice. If it ends up covering the whole thing, that's fine. But again, try to start on one side. Doesn't really matter what side. But our paint is still wet, so it's gonna blend right in there. Right? And we are gonna end up putting a little texture on these guys, so if this looks kind of funky right now just on its own, that's fine. If anybody has an aloe plant, you know they got those kind of spikes on the sides. And we're definitely gonna incorporate those. So this is just helping to separate our leaves from one another. And these can kind of just all come together at the bottom. You see, I'm just kind of dragging it right through to the bottom. They overlap a little bit at the bottom, but it's all good. Okay, so we have the bases of our plant here. So I'm going to take my same brush. Oh, I just stuck my finger right in there. So I'm going to take my same brush. I'm going to just kind of wipe it against one of my empty containers. I want to get a good amount of this paint out of here. You see all that just came off there. If you have a paper towel or a rag or something, you can certainly use that too. So we're not cleaning the brush per se, we're just getting a lot of the excess paint off. So it, you know, if I do this, nothing's really going to come off. It's just in there, you know. So then what we're going to do is we're going to come on the sides here and we're going to make that, oh, it's kind of hard to see. We're going to make that characteristic texture, you can see a little bit there, of these aloes. Okay. And so what you can do is if you just kind of squeegeed off this little white-green mixture here, if it's a lot of white, you can go ahead and use that one. If you don't have quite enough white in there, you can dip back in your white and get a little bit of that on there. So you can see I have kind of like a white-green mix on here. So again, use that little scraped off paint that you just used there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come on the edge of these leaves and we're going to use our angled brush. So this is a good place where your little angled brush is going to come into play. If you don't have an angled brush, that's okay. Get one that is flat. Let me see if I can find one. Okay, so this is my angled brush. You can see the top is kind of a diagonal. If you don't have an angled brush, you can use one of these, flat brush that you have. So the way to make this an angled brush is you just hold it like this, right? So you're just not going to hold it straight so it's flat. You're going to hold it angled so it turns into an angled brush. This will work perfectly fine. You're just going to have to hold it at a different angle so that it, let's see. You'll just have to hold it at a different angle so that it mimics this same angle here. So I'm going to be kind of dabbing this on. You're just going to have to do it differently with this brush. If you don't have a flat brush either, or if your flat brush is too big, if you only have like this size of a flat brush, then I would say don't use the bigger one. If you don't have a flat brush or an angled brush, come with one of your smaller I'll say detail brushes, one of these smaller kind of round brushes if you have one of those, and then you're going to do the same thing. So you're going to just kind of put it at an angle. So when you're doing your little dabs of texture, it's gonna kind of make that same angled brush shape if you put it at an angle, because you're gonna be painting with this whole part of the brush. So it's gonna kind of, let's see if I can do this. It's gonna kind of mimic, see what we have going on here. If you're making spots with this, or if you're making spots with this, it's gonna kind of come out the same. So we have options here. All right, so like I said, we're gonna take each of these little branches, we're gonna take our angled brush. Again, you don't want it up and down, you don't want it horizontal. You're gonna take it at maybe a 45-degree angle. And all you're gonna do is you're gonna come on your edge and you're gonna press up and down. And you want those little bits to kind of hang off the edge of each of your plants here. Now usually I'm saying paint in the lines here, but here you're going to paint a little bit out of the lines because you want that edge, let's see if you can see it, you want that edge to look like you have the little spikes that aloe plants have, right? So again, I'm dabbing up and down, I'm letting them hang off the edge just a little. So that it gives you that kind of spiky look. Just up, down, you're not painting any perfect lines here. You're just kind of tapping as you go down. All right, see we're getting some texture in there. And now here's some food for thought. I am only doing it on one side of each of the leaves. If you were to look at a real aloe plant, you'd probably see it on both sides. You know, on an aloe plant, both sides of the leaves are spiky. But I wanted to make sure that the colors stood through. We did that nice blending with our white and our green. And I want to make sure that we can see that. So I'm not going to put the spikes on both sides, but if you like the way that the texture looks, you certainly can do it on the whole thing. But there, we have our little textured aloe there. Okay. Gonna go ahead and rinse this brush. Then we're going to jump over. We're going to jump back to this guy. You can use a similar angled brush or a flat brush or a round brush for this guy. He is not too specific. So just any kind of, I'll say small brush. This is maybe 1/4 inch or something. It's pretty small. To fill this guy in. And so if you have a lot of paint on this aloe over here that's going to be overlapped by your succulent, then go ahead and pause the video, give it a blow dry, and come back. If it's not that thick or not that wet over here, then that's fine. You don't need to blow dry it. But we'll kind of call it like it is. We'll start on this side. By the time we get over here, maybe it'll be dry. So what we're gonna do, again, I know I've said this a few times, you're gonna start always in the background and move to the foreground, and that applies for each individual piece also. So if you look at what I have here, if you think about how you would look at this or a succulent in real life, if I were to reach out and touch the succulent in real life, what part of the succulent would my hand hit first, right? So think about this if it was 3D. So my hand would touch these ones in the front first, so the ones on the front side, and then the ones on the back side are going to be kind of tucked behind these guys in the front. So which ones do we want to paint first? We want to paint this back layer first because the bottoms of these leaves, are going to be tucked behind these guys in the front. So even when we're dealing with one single object, you still want to kind of follow the background first, middle ground, foreground last rule. It's just going to make it a lot easier than having to try to tuck those back leaves behind the ones in the foreground. You definitely can do it, and sometimes there are reasons to do things out of order sometimes. That's definitely the case. It's not like a hard and fast rule. But on areas where you can help it, if you have a choice, you know, where am I going to start on this thing, it's better to start with the ones that are in the background and then go to the ones that are in the foreground. It's going to make your dimensions of your 3D objects a lot more convincing. If you try to tuck your background things behind something that you've already painted, it's a little bit less convincing. Your edges aren't going to like line up super nice and clean, and it's going to kind of make that illusion of depth disappear. You'll be surprised at how fast it really flattens something out if something is not in the correct order. So again, there are times when that doesn't apply, but most of the time, if you have a choice, start with the thing in the background, work your way to the foreground. Okay, so this guy. What we're going to start with is we're going to fill them all in with our dark blue, the one that we mixed up before. So just a reminder, or whatever color you're using. This color was the blue straight out of the bottle, but we added that little tiny drop of white in it to make it a little less transparent. So we're going to take this blue on this, I'm using my angled brush again, but this guy's not too particular. Use a round one or a flat one, whatever you have. Just make sure it's small enough that you can kind of get in these corners here. So we're going to fill these leaves in. I'll do half of them. I'll do the top layer first. And I'll say fill them in, but they don't need to be 100% filled in because we're going to bring some white in there. Just put down your first layer as, ooh, that wasn't great. Put down your first layer as much as you can. If it's see-through, that's fine. We just want to start with something. And so again, I'm coming over here. I'm overlapping this guy with my blue. All right, so I have my base there. I'm going to throw this guy in too. So these are all what I'm considering my background leaves. And so now with the same brush, I'm going to start to do my white. So I'm not gonna rinse it. It's my blue underneath that white there. And the areas where you want to have your white is in the center of the leaves. So I'm going to start painting my white in between here. And since the blue is so wet, it's going to work into this white. This is hard to do at this angle. All right, there we go. So it definitely doesn't need to be perfect. We're just filling in. We're gonna focus on the center being the lighter part. You can always add some of the darker blue back in. And as you brush it, like I said, since that dark blue is still wet, it's gonna kind of just mix itself. And so by doing it this way, we're avoiding having to mix a light blue. Since that dark blue is so wet, it's going to kind of just make that light blue on its own. We don't need to mix it in our palette. We don't need to spend the time mixing a separate color. As you can see, there's no real white left. It's pretty much just our light blue. And so if you look at mine, my dark blue on my edges has kind of disappeared. It's mixed in with that white. So if I want to go back in with my dark blue to kind of deepen these edges a little bit, I can definitely do that because my light blue is still wet. So again, should blend in here nice and smoothly. Don't worry about getting these petals perfectly smooth. Petals, leaves. I'm gonna keep changing what I call them, I guess. Don't worry about getting them perfectly smooth. You do want some of that texture in the leaves. Okay, so the last important thing I'll say is that you do want the bottoms of these leaves to be kind of darker also. So where they attach to the plant, I'll say, is where you want to make sure you have some of your darker blue, because that's what's going to kind of differentiate between those new leaves and these leaves. Okay, so we have our first layer. All right, so we're going to do the very same thing, except now we're going to add these in between little shapes here. You can see that I had them drawn on before, but they're pretty much gone now. That's okay. You can just kind of add them back in. And so what I would do is I'll take the same brush with my white and I'll kind of paint back in my shapes. Let's see, how are they going to go? Maybe something like that. Maybe one over here. Right, and so everything is still wet. So my white and my blue are blending. I'm getting that kind of in between color, that nice light blue in the center here. Again, if your edges are not dark enough, go ahead, dip in your dark blue. You can darken up those sides. If you really feel like your new petals are pulling the paint off of your outside petals, you can always take a break right here and give your first layer a blow dry before you move on to the second layer here. For the sake of time, I'll try to make it work here. You know, but if you do need that dryness on the first layer, that's fine, because that first layer is done. We're not going to mess with the color on those too much. We're going to add maybe a little bit to the tips, but nothing too crazy. And I'll just add my final guy on here. If your brush gets too saturated with paint, you can go ahead and rinse it, dry it, start over. All right. So we've got a succulent, right? Maybe I'll add one other leaf over here. Just looks like it needs it over here. Yeah, okay. So we have the sky here. And so I'll show you what I did. If you look at this one and how it looks a little different from this one, there's a couple things that you can do to give it a little more interest, a little more life in it. So in this one over here, I painted my leaves pretty smooth. So what you can do is you can take your dark blue on the same brush. I did clean it. So just take your dark blue if you want to add a little something to these leaves, and you can make them very thin lines kind of down the center here on each leaf. And they'll show up nice and bright if you do them in the middle, because our middles are the lighter part of our leaves, right? The middle is where we try to work that white in. So if you feel like your leaves need a little something, try just giving them a little stripe. All right, something like that. If you don't quite like the way that looks, or you don't feel like yours need that, another thing that you can do is add to the darker parts of the leaves. So where the leaves attach to the main plant, I'll say, we can add to that. And for this plant over here, these darker parts, I used the green that I used to make this. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. To contribute to the darker parts over here, I'm going to use the green that I used over here. And that's this. So I'm going to take my same brush. I'm going to dip just a little bit into this darker green that I had used to make my aloe over here. And I'm going to come right in these little nooks and crannies over here, right where all the leaves come together. So at the bottom of each of these leaves, I'm going to give it just a little bit of this green. And this is going to help sell the idea that your plant has depth, that it is three-dimensional, and that it has this nice shape to it. And it helps make it look like these leaves are kind of, you know, they're disappearing to somewhere, right? They're not just stacked on top of each other like a fan. So if you see this side, I did the little, some of this little green in there. And hopefully you can see a little bit of a difference from this side versus this side. And so you will have some of that darkness already from the darker blue. This just kind of helps push it a little bit. Okay. Last thing I'm going to do to this guy is I'm going to work on the little tips. And so again, I'm going to keep the same brush. It's got that green on it from our succulent. And so if your little points on the top of your succulent here didn't come out super thin or super pointed, that's where this guy's going to come in. What you're going to do is you're going to go on the top of each one, and you're really just going to make a little a little hat on each one. Let's see if I can get closer. So I'm going to come on the top of this guy. I'm going to go down the left side, down the right side, and that's it. If you want to come into the middle a little bit, you can do that. But what I'm really doing is I'm just kind of pointing the ends here. And I'm going to do that on every one. That also helps those little tips kind of stand out. You're adding a little variety to your color, making it more interesting. Like I said, this one, it's kind of a more is more situation, so adding another color onto this succulent is only going to help it. If you've done a different color succulent, you want to stick with a secondary color, so this green is going to be our secondary color. But you want to stick with a secondary color that's in the same family, I'll say. So we kind of did like a blue-green here. And so when you're doing your succulent, if you did like a pink succulent, you would want to kind of stick with a pink or a red, maybe a darker pink, a purple, something in the same color field to complement the first color, right? So I wouldn't do like a blue succulent with like orange tips. That might be a little bit too much. Your little points and your lowlights won't blend as well. So stick with something in the same, if you're going to do a warm color, use your secondary color is going to be a warm color. If you're going to do a cool color, have your secondary color be a cool color. All right. So we have a lot of what we're doing done. We're going to kind of change gears now. We're going to do our little needles. Is that what they're called? Needles? We're going to do our little spikes on our cacti first, and then we're going to start to fill in with our, I don't want to call them fillers, but our little flowers. But we're going to do our little spikes first. So I used 2 different colors for this, but you can, again, certainly change it up. I used the dark green that we used up here, so it's going to be this green. It's kind of the one that we used to make this guy down here, this right here. I used that to make the spikes on these paddle ones, because again, I wanted to stay away from black as much as I could. You can certainly do them in black if you don't have this color, like if you did a different color for your aloe, or if you ran out, or if you don't like this color that much. Certainly use just any other darker color. You just want to make sure they stand out from the paddle. And then for the top ones, I used white. If you have a lot of dark green on your paddles here, you could or your tall guys here, you could definitely use like a yellow or a very, very light green, any kind of lighter color to do the needles up here. I used the white just because I felt like it stood out the most. So let's start down here, because we're going to do kind of two methods here. Our spikes on our paddles are going to be different than the spikes up here. And so what you're going to do is you're going to use the direction and the shape of these paddles as your guide to use your little, or to do your little spikes. And so the little spikes on these paddle guys are going to just be little, I'll say arrowheads. So you're going to do one stripe on the left to one stripe on the right, and you're going to end up with this, almost this little inverted V type thing. And that's all that these are going to be. I'll kind of, let me bring this closer here. So if you look over here, it's one swipe left, one swipe right, and that's it. And they're kind of going to go in the direction of the top of your cactus paddle. So the point of the two sides is going to point towards the top point of your paddle. That was too many points. You'll see what I mean. Okay, so take one of your smallest brushes, your little detail brush. If you dip into the paint and you get too much on your brush, take it on the side here and roll it. It'll kind of gather up all your bristles. And so let me start with this one so we can really see it. So like I said, you're going to point all of your little needles towards the top. You're going to start at the top. You're going to go down on the left, down on the right, and that's it. You've got a little V. Down, left, down, right. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Just over and over. Give them a little space in between. They don't need to be perfectly equidistant from each other. Don't worry about making them like super even. But if you see what I mean when I said they all point kind of towards your point up here. All right. So go ahead and do the same thing on your other little paddles. So these are going to be pointing in a different direction from the other ones that I just did, because this paddle is pointing to the left and this paddle is pointing to the right. So my little spiky arrows, I guess, are going to be pointing a different direction. Alright. We got one more. So these are going to be going the same direction as the ones I just did. One, two, 1, 2, 1, 2. All right. I'm going to use the same brush again. I'm going to go ahead and rinse it. Rinse it, dry it, start over. Now if you look up here at our taller cacti, we're going to be doing the needles a little bit different. So these, again, I'm going to use white on mine. If you want to use yellow or light green, any other kind of lighter color, you can certainly do that. But what's important for these that I found was that they're a little bit more structured than these ones that we just did. So these, you're going to want to pick either your light green stripes or your dark green stripes, or again, whatever colors you used. Pick one color that you used on here, and that's how you're going to line up your needles. So when I did my first one, I just put the needles all over and it looked so bad. It's so like chaotic. It just wasn't, I don't know, it didn't look good. Because if you've ever looked at a cactus, if you think about our colors here as the like little plates that kind of stick out, so your dark ones are going to be like your kind of receding ones, and your light ones in theory are going to be the pieces that stick out. And so your spikes are only going to grow on the areas that stick out on this certain type of cactus. So if you think about the cactus in real life, it has those ridges. The spikes are on the outside of the ridges. So to have them on your light parts and your dark parts doesn't really make sense in real life. And it seems kind of like a detail, but it really didn't look right when I did it. So try to pick one or the other color and stick to that color for where you're going to put your needles. And I'll kind of show you what I mean. So for this part, we're going to take just a little bit of our white like we did for down here. And for this guy, I'm going to put my needles on the dark greens. And so you can do any kind of combination of little needles on this part. You can do single ones, you can do two, you can do like a little cross. It's kind of nice if you have a variety, right? But I'm going to keep doing this on just my dark green spots. So if you look, I'm going kind of straight up and down here. And then when I move into the middle, I'm going to stick with the dark green. all the way down this dark green here. I'm doing little sets of 2, little individual spikes. You can do little crosses here. You can do little sets of 3. Okay. Now look at what we've got here. That looks like a cactus to me. Okay, and you can switch it up from cactus to cactus. Like if I want to do my little spikes, since this one is much more light green, if I wanted to do my spikes on this one on the light green, that's okay, but just make sure you keep it consistent from plant to, well, within each individual plant, sorry. From plant to plant you can change it, but within each plant try to keep it consistent. So I'm gonna continue with my other one. Maybe this one I'll do the light greens. Make sure you get some around the outsides like I'm doing here. You don't necessarily have to do them first, but just, again, to add to the 3D effect here, you kind of want some sticking out from the outsides. Try not to make, if you make one of them straight up and down, that's fine, but try not to make too many of your little spikes just straight up and down. Give them a little 45 degrees to the left or 45 degrees to the right, if you can. And now, let me just say this too. If you really loved the way that your cactus looked before, and you're not interested in putting spikes on it, if you want it to be a nice friendly cactus, that's fine too. If you wanted to do just spikes around the outside, if you wanted to not do any in the center, you can do that. If you want to just let, we're going to do like some flowers later. So if you want to like just let the flowers shine on these top guys, then we can just do the flowers, so you don't have to do these. Again, it's totally up to you. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of change gears to our flowers. And so you're going to want 2, I'll say medium to smaller size brushes. If you, sorry, there's one hair, you can't see it sticking up on this one brush. If you have an angled brush like this one, I would say this will come in handy when we're doing these kind of rigid, or ridged, I meant, little purple details down here. But again, they can be whatever color. But that type of little flower that we're doing is going to be easier with an angled brush like this. But we're also going to need a flat one or a round one, whatever you have to make this type of flower here. You can use whatever type of brush you want if we want to do a little flower like this up here. So we have options. So what I'm going to do is we'll start with the bigger flowers first. They're going to fill the most spaces. So anywhere where you have that you want something covered, if you, like I said, if you have a space in between something that doesn't line up very well, I think, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think I lined all this up really nice, so I might not put as many flowers in. You can certainly put them around the outsides if you want. But see, if you look here on my canvas, the difference between like this paddle and this paddle is not very distinct. They just kind of blend into each other here, and that doesn't, I mean, not that the whole thing looks realistic, but that doesn't look right there to me. So I'm definitely going to stick a flower right there. Some other spots that I'm seeing, I might stick one right here because you can see some of the orange through my paddle a little bit, and we don't want my paddle to look see-through, so maybe I'll stick one over here. Maybe I'll put one at the bottom here just to have another one. If the middle of your succulent didn't come out the way you want it to, throw a little flower down there. You could definitely just put one like down here at the bottom, one over here. You know, you can stick them kind of in between your little pieces here. Or if you don't want to do any flowers, if you just want to do these little details, or if you just want to leave it like this, you can leave it like this. But I'll show you how to do a few different types. And so we're going to be using, or what I used was a little bit of pink. Which means I'm going to need some red and I'm going to need some white. What I'm going to do is similar to the thing that we did with our blue. I'm going to take my red right out of the bottle and I'm going to mix a drop of white into it so that the red is not so transparent. So same thing that we did with this color. It's not going to turn your red pink by any means. You're probably not even going to see the color change that much. But just dip your brush into your white and add like a tiny, tiny bit of white to it. Just so it's not so transparent. Because we do want a vibrant red. What happens when you take it right out of the bottle sometimes, unless you're using like professional paint. If you have professional acrylics, those are much more pigmented. What happens with craft paint, kids paint, student paint even, non-professional paint, it's definitely cheaper, but it's not as pigmented, so you kind of, you get what you pay for, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be as good as that other paint. You just kind of need to supplement it sometimes. So you throwing just a touch of white in there, you see it doesn't really even change the color, it's still bright, bright red, but it will make it a fuller color when we apply it. So what we're going to do for these bigger pink flowers is we're going to do kind of the half brush in one color, half brush in the other color method. If you've taken a class with me, then you might know what I mean, but I'll explain it. So to get the kind of variety of colors that we have in these pink flowers, what we're going to do is we're going to dip half of our brush in red and half of our brush in white. So if you look there, I have half red and half white. They're gonna blend together, that's the point. So don't worry about getting it perfectly half and half, or having one side of the brush be clean for this color and when we want them to blend. So don't think about this part too much. We just want to make sure we have two colors that are going to kind of mesh together. And you could definitely, these would look really nice if you did half your brush with your red and half your brush with your orange. I might do one of those next. So like I said, more is more with this one. Do some flowers, some colors, some flowers, the other colors. Use a variety. It's going to look so rich and full and lively and great if you add a lot to this. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to start in the center here. This is the area that I said I wanted to focus on. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start at I'll say the top of the petal, so the part that's furthest away from the center of the petal, and we're going to kind of make a football shape similar to how we did down here. So we're going to do left side, right side, and we're going to keep doing that all the way around. So you're going to start at the top, you're going to pull down in kind of a curve, left side, pull down in a curve, right side, left side, right side. If you need to fill in that middle, that's okay. I might need to re-dip in my paint. So same thing, start at the end, left side, right side, left side, right side. Left side, right side. Okay, you've got a flower. Now mine's a little uneven because I'm trying to do it sideways, so let me even these guys out a little bit. But same technique, left side, right side. Okay. All right. So that's almost there. It's a little uneven, but that's okay. Okay. And so that's going to be the base of our flower. We're going to worry about the center a little bit later, so don't worry about that yet. We can go ahead and do another one here or there. Actually, if you look at this one, I have a little like half flower over here sticking from behind one of my pieces, so I'll kind of show you how to do that. So when you come on the edge of this cactus, how we did the petals over here is we did left side, right side on the petal. Each petal was kind of two brush strokes. Over here, you're going to do the same thing, but when you do the petal that's right next to the cactus, you're only going to do one side of it. So it's going to kind of look like you tucked it back behind there. So I'll show you what I mean. If I'm going to do one over here, I'm going to do like just the right side of the petal. So then when I get over here, I'm going to keep doing what I did before. Left side, right side. Left side, right side. You're going to try not to get over that petal too much. Left side, right side. Right, so then it kind of looks like it's kind of poking out from behind that cactus right there. If you're a little bit worried about kind of tucking one in there, like I said, it's usually better to do background, foreground, but if you want to try to stick something back there, you can do that. If you're not so sure, you definitely don't have to do that. Let me go ahead and try one with red and orange. Like I said, that might look nice. So maybe I'll do one down here. So I'm going to do the same technique. I'm going to do those footballs, left side, right side. I'll try to make this one a little bit smaller. I'm going to re-dip. I like that one. With the orange and the red. Okay. Let's see, where else can I put one? I think I might leave it at that because we have the idea. If you want to fill out your canvas more, if you have a lot more spots where you feel like you need those flowers, or if you just got really good at them and you like to make them, then certainly put as many as you want. They look really nice in little bunches. So if you did like 1, 2, like one right next to this, 1, 2, or even up here if you did like 1, 2 next to each other, that looks really nice, especially if you use 2 different colors. Like if you did my red orange down here and my red white up here, you can do completely different colors. You could do purple ones, you could do blue ones, you could even do green ones. If you want to do a super, super dark or a super, super light green, pink ones, orange ones, neon green, whatever you want. So that's the one type of flower that we're doing. So then we're going to go to another type of flower. This is really the filler stuff. You're in between, where do I have gaps right now? Where does it not seem as full? That's what these little guys are going to do. And I think they're really nice looking. So that's what we're going to focus on now. And again, what we're going to do is we're going to use the paints that we already have. We're going to mix up a purple, because that's kind of the only color that I don't have right now. I don't have yellow, but yellow doesn't stand up very well against these super bright colors. So I'm going to go with purple. So if you look on here, I have some blue, I have some red. We're going to mix together, we're going to make purple. So I'll take a scoop of the blue, a scoop of the red. The more red you add to a purple, the more it's going to look kind of like a grapey purple or like a wine purple. The more blue you add, the more it's going to look like a periwinkle, lavender type blue. And we are going to be mixing this purple with white. So it's going to get a little bit lighter on the canvas than it is in your palette. So if it looks too deep for you, I would say don't worry about it too much. All right, so I used all my blue, all my red to make my purple, right? We're repurposing here. Okay. Now to make our little in-between guys here, there's kind of a certain method to it. It's not super hard. You mixed up your paint with this brush, so I'm going to keep the same brush, and we're going to do kind of what we did with the pink flowers, where we're going to do half the brush one color, half the brush another color. So we're going to do our top edge of the brush is going to be purple, and then if you can, stick the bottom half of your brush, so the lower point, into your white. And you could do it reversed also. You could do the top white and the bottom purple. We're just going to do half and half. And so the brush stroke that we're going to do with this is we're going to find where we want the bottom of our little flower here, and we're going to kind of go up and down, but you're going to return to that bottom point here. So say I'm starting in the middle of my hand. If I want to do one of these flowers, I'm going to go up and down, kind of in a fan, but I'm going to keep returning to that center of the spot. And let me make a bigger one to kind of show you here. So let's see, I'll do one right here. So let's say this right here, where these two cactuses meet and where this paddle meets, that's going to be my starting point right there, right? So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to go up and down, and I'm going to keep returning to this middle point, so it kind of comes out like a fan, right? So let me redip. Let me do one over here. So you can do the same thing. You can just kind of brush it up and down if you want. You don't have to pick it up every time. So I'm starting at the center point's going to be down here. So you're not making a whole round flower. You're just making kind of little half blooms, I guess. And so you can use these to top one of your cacti. You see I put a little bit of red in this one. Right? Can use these down here in between my other flowers. These are really good space fillers. You can use a lot of these. They're just small enough that they're not going to be overwhelming, but they're big enough to fill the space if you need them to. So up, down, returning to that center point. These also look good in little bunches here. Okay, so you see I'm just filling in as I go. Let's see. I need one more. Where can I put it? I'll do one up here. All right, and just like that, you have this really full, beautiful little bouquet here. All right, and so this one at the top is kind of the same thing that I just did, except I used two different colors. So I used orange and red over here, and I used that same purple and white over here. I just made this one quite a bit bigger, and I added a center on it, so I'll show you. So let's see. We'll do maybe a red and purple. We'll see what that looks like. I'm gonna try it so you don't have to. If it doesn't come out good, then we'll just learn from it, right? So let's try it on this guy here. So again, I'm just gonna kind of wiggle it back to this is gonna be my center, right there. I'm gonna start on the outside and I'm just gonna kind of up and down, wiggle it towards my center here. That one actually looks pretty nice. All right, and if you want to do the same style, but you want to do a little one, see I kind of did them in pairs here. There's usually like a bigger flower and then a little bud, I guess. You can definitely do just a little one, but the same idea. Just kind of come back to the center there. Okay. All right. And you can always do these in 2 layers too, if you have a bigger flower like this. Let's see. I'll give you an example on this one because it's one of my big ones. I did it a little bit right here. If you're wanting to do it in 2 layers to give the flower a little bit more depth, do 1 layer like this that's nice and big, and then do a second layer that's a little bit smaller. So you're not going to go up quite as high. You're going to start at the same center point, and you're going to go up and up and up and up. Just smaller. Right, so you're adding another layer onto it there, giving it a little more depth. And you can change the colors up too if you want. Let's see. Let's do a white at the top here on this one. We'll see what we come up with. All right, 2 layers just gives it a little bit of depth. All right, our very last thing here. We are almost there. Our very last thing is going to be the centers of our flowers. So depending on what type of center you want to do, grab either one of these brushes or both of these brushes. Sorry, I have too many brushes. All right. So to do the long stemmed center, they're more like tropical looking flower centers. I don't know if that exactly fits this type of flower. But if you're wanting to do those kind of long stems in the middle, grab just a very small, maybe your thinnest brush that you have. If you're wanting to do a bigger, almost looks like a kind of like a poppy center like this one, a little bit of a darker one, then grab a stiffer brush. It doesn't need to be round or flat or straight or anything, but grab a brush that is stiffer because we're going to be just kind of poking it in there, and you want the texture of those bristles to be in there. You don't want to just put a big black circle in the middle. You want it to be kind of speckled. So any brush that's, if you have like a really rough looking brush, like something like this is like, I mean, they might as well be made out of like metal. They're so stiff and they're so pokey and it's just so bad, but keep these brushes because you're going to use them for things like this. So let's see. If I wanted to do the kind of yellow center in this flower, because that one's bigger, so I'll show it to you there. We'll take just a dab of our yellow. And what we'll do is we're going to make a couple, maybe 2 or 3 little stems here, kind of reaching out from the middle. And they can be dramatic, make them make them nice and long, right? And then what I did was I came on the end of each one and I put a little dot. And if you feel like your center needs more, you can always take your little yellow and make some additional little dots in the center there. Okay. You can also do just the dots if I want to come over here and not have to do those long stems. If you're worried about pulling out that nice long straight line, you can kind of just have the center be little polka dots there, no stems. So those are for those bigger pointed kind of flat flowers. This one down here has got some orange, so maybe I'll do this kind of stem guy down there. If you have a flower like this guy, maybe I'll make another one because that one doesn't look too much like it needs a center. But I'll give you an example. So if you look at this one up top here, those both have a little center. Like I said, it almost looks like a little poppy or something. But I'll make one that looks like that so I can show you. I'll make it on this guy, I guess. So same method. Okay, so nice big flower up there. And so this is where you're gonna take your not good brush, your stiff old nasty brush, and you're going to take a touch of your black. Like I said, this is the only place where maybe we're gonna use black. Just a little tiny bit. And we're going to stipple it into the center here. So when I'm doing a stippling thing like that, I want to dip into my paint, but then I kind of want to brush it off onto the sides until I get a texture that I like. So if you look over here, that was so much paint. And then I kind of went around to here, to here, to here until I got these kind of lighter dots. So don't get too much paint when you're doing this one. So if I wanted to put a dark center on this guy, I'm going to take just some of my black paint and I'm just going to press up and down right there, giving it a little bit of texture. It's a little hard to see. Do another one. I'll do this one down here. So if I want to give it that dark center, I'm just going to press up and down. I'm not brushing the brush. I'm just going straight up and down. It's going to give it that nice dark center. And you could do that on any of these. You can do this dark center on these pink ones too if you want. Whatever kind of texture you like the best or that you feel like you can do the best. If you don't feel like you can pull those kind of straight yellow lines, then you definitely don't need to do that. Whatever you feel comfortable with, whatever option you like the best. Okay, so that's, gonna be it. Like I said, on this one, a little different than normal, more is more. Put as many flowers, different plants, succulents as you want in there. If you want to fill up this whole thing, I'm all the happier to see you do that. So thanks for doing this one with me. Let's see, so this is the April painting. So unfortunately, I'm only going to be here painting with you all until June. So we only have 2 more paintings together. I'm going to do a May one and a June one. So if you've ever wanted to request a painting, if you have something that we haven't painted yet, or that you haven't painted yet with me, or you haven't been able to do with anyone else, please let me know. Either email Rebecca or myself, and we'll, I'll definitely take requests for those last 2. Even if it's not a seasonally appropriate painting, if you have this really special Christmas painting that you wanted to do, or a fall painting or something in particular that you've wanted to do, let me know and we'll see if we can work it in. So like I said, get those requests, and if you have always been thinking of one, if you've had it in the back of your head and you haven't been able to do it yet, let me know. And as always, if you do this painting, if you do the class, let me see those pictures. Either put them in the comments or email them to Rebecca. I love to see when you guys do these. If you have any questions, I will be with you watching the class when it happens on Saturday at 11. So put your comments in the comments of the video as they're going if you have any particular questions, especially about mixing colors, because this one has a lot of mixed colors. So if you're new to this, or sometimes colors just don't come out right. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, and we'll see y'all in May.